Hey everyone, welcome back. Another great tutorial as part of our Roblox Studio Introductory Series. So far in previous videos we have covered the basic controls within Roblox Studios, uh, building parts, using the solid modeling tools to modify the shapes of our parts and build some rather unique structures and things like that. Really covered a lot of the basics that can get you started with creating your own content. One thing that we haven't touched so far yet is the world itself. And in today's video, we're going to go ahead and do that. That includes not only just the ground that you run on, but the sky, the lighting, the sun, atmospheric effects, a lot of things like that. We're going to cover as much of that as we can here in this video. This is probably going to end up spilling into a two-part just because there is a lot of ground to cover, but I'm going to try my best to move through it as fast as I can. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. We have some other great videos here that really start from a zero experience approach to Roblox Studio, unlike a lot of other tutorials that are out there that expect you to know what you're doing and be able to dive right in and follow along. I have no expectations like that. So if you have never touched Studio before, this is the perfect spot for you to be at. So drop a subscription, make sure to follow along. There's a lot more videos coming. First thing I'm going to do here, so I have a base plate template loaded. I'm going to remove the base plate because we are not going to touch it. We don't want it, so we're going to kill it. So I have a completely empty workspace, and that's exactly what we're after. We're going to open up this terrain menu for the first time and start going through what these tools do. I'm going to start with generate. Now when we click this, you're going to notice a dialog up here, and this is sort of a wizard for the settings and things that are going to apply to the terrain that gets created. The very first option that you're going to see is map size, and just like the name says, this is going to determine how large the terrain that gets generated is going to be. Seed is a bit of a challenging concept to understand if you've never had any experience with this. The way that the terrain generator works, it uses some very complex math algorithms to determine how that terrain gets drawn out, and it does do a random generation, but the randomness is repeatable randomness, which seems a little bit weird to understand, but let me try to explain. If I have the same settings selected here, everything identical, no matter how many times I come back and hit generate, or if I close this and reopen later and come back and fill all of this out exactly the same, if that seed never changes, even though the terrain generation is randomized, the end result is going to be exactly the same. And the reason behind that is the seed right here. So this kind of gives it a starting point for those algorithms that it runs through. And as long as that starting point doesn't change, then it's going to produce the same result every time. So this is something that you're probably not going to find yourself making much use of unless you were really very strict in the terrain that gets created, and you find some that you really like and you want to hang on to. That's where you're going to make use of this seed. But just going in and hitting random values in here, really all it's going to do is just change the end result. So if you're not happy with what gets produced, you can come up and modify this. It can be letters or numbers, doesn't matter, and produce a completely different terrain. Caves, if you enable this, it's going to create holes in our terrain, and they could be above or below ground. And it does produce some pretty complex networks of caves that you can run underneath the ground, and they connect to each other through some tunnels. Really cool stuff you can do with that. Um, Biomes are these different sections here, different types of terrain that get created, and biome size, uh, just like the name suggests, just kind of determines how large those regions are. And then we have all of the different types that can be selected. So, if we wanted to add some lava or snow or whatever, we can do all of that. I'm going to leave all of these settings as they are and just go ahead and run this so you can see. Now, we get this progress window up here, and you can see it drawing chunk by chunk. Now, trying to move the camera around while it's doing this, it is going to be very jumpy, very laggy. That's expected. This is a heavy process that it's going through. It's creating a lot of chunks here, using a lot of math, and really spitting this out. And it's really quite quick for what it does. If you are familiar with some other 3D engines, this can tend to be slow in some of them depending on what process they use and stuff like that. So this is actually pretty quick. But here we have it. So we've just created our terrain with various sections. So we've got our mountain regions with the snow on top. Now I didn't select water, but it still created some. These are very shallow bodies here, which is actually not affected by the biomes here. I believe maybe planes might be responsible for that. You can play around with these settings and get lots of different results with it, but that's something that's going to come down to experimentation on your end. And again, if I were to hit generate, because I'm not changing the seed, it would create the same set of terrain all over again, exactly as you see it. If I were to make a change to this and type something random in here and hit generate, it would spit out a completely new set of terrain for us. But I'm not going to do that just because it's time consuming. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to show you some of these other tools. A lot of these are very similar in what they do. I'm going to walk through them anyway. You'll notice we have add and grow. They are very, very similar in what they do. Subtract and erode, same thing. But we will go ahead and walk through them anyway. So I'm going to click on add, and you'll see that our cursor has this. For me, it's a circle. For you, it might be defaulted to a block. This just determines what your region looks like that it's going to manipulate. And I apologize, my assets are loading really slow today for some reason. But that just sort of shows you which area is going to be affected. And we can increase or decrease the size, and also the strength of the effect. The higher this is, the more drastic this effect becomes, and the lower it is, the less that these regions will be affected by the tool. And I'll show you a quick example here. So if I come in here, I'm going to leave it set to grass. I don't know why these assets are still not loading, but never mind. So if I start there they are. So now I've just clicked and dragged, and we've created this grassy region here. I'll select my sphere, do the same thing, so we now have a more rounded area. Snap to grid. If you notice, we have, let me get my camera up here so you can see. There's a grid down here, and you'll also see the grid reflected around the cursor. Right now, snap to grid is turned off, so when we move around, it's very, very fluid. If I turn this on, you'll see that it is jumping and snapping itself to the grid. I usually work with this turned off. Ignore water. Depending on how you have this toggled, the changes that you make are either going to replace the water and treat the water as if it was just air like you saw here, or it's going to work around the water, and that's what this option does. Your material lets you select what gets created when you start drawing out these regions. So here we have sand, rock, so on and so forth. You can also do water if you'd like. And auto determines that based on the elevation. So you'll see here it's pretty consistent. We have grass at the bottom, and then we progress into sort of this limestone, and then finally rock, and at the very top we have Arctic, and that's based on the elevation. Auto is going to give you the same effect. So if we come up here and we start raising this up, well, really poor example for some reason. Here we are. So and it's actually, you know what, I apologize. I gave some bad information here. I don't ever use auto. I like to be in more control of that. Auto is actually, it appears to be based on, it is. So it's actually taking into account existing terrain. So rather cool. I actually did not know that about this tool. You know, normally when I'm manipulating, like I said, I'm doing my own selective material here. I don't like tools deciding for me. But anyway, so there is the add tool. Subtract is the exact opposite. So we can remove terrain. You see it's just sort of erasing it there. Paint lets you change the type of terrain without changing the elevation. And what I mean by that is, let's say I wanted to have some lava on top of this mountain rather than snow. If I select my lava here as my material and I start painting, it's replacing the material without changing the dimensions of the terrain. So it's almost like I'm just taking a paintbrush and just running it over it. Grow is very similar to add. It's a little bit smoother and slower than the add tool. And erode, as you can imagine, is the opposite. So if I do subtract here, okay, so I just burrowed pretty deep in there. If I do erode, it's much less dramatic. I have to hold my cursor much longer. And then smooth attempts to level the area between two sections of terrain and just smooth out the edges and even things out a little bit. Regions is really cool. Regions allows you to select an area and you get handles just like you do on parts. And you can do a lot of things with it. If I select this region here, I raise this up, I can come in here and delete and just wipe away everything that was inside the box, and what we're left with is a flat area. This is really good for clearing space for builds, bases, and whatnot, where you need a flat area to work with. If I want to relocate a section of the map, I can draw a region around it, hit move, and I can actually move those pieces of terrain wherever I need them to go. These other tools you're already familiar with from working with parts. Same concept. We can also copy, draw another region, paste, boom. And fill is a really handy tool. This is the one that I use most frequently. So I've kind of got a bowl started here, which is perfect for this demo. I'm going to grow this area here and just sort of raise this lip up a little bit. Okay, just like that. And if you're picky, we can come in and smooth this a little bit more, make it a little bit less jagged looking, just like that. So we've already got a little bit of water in here. Let's say I want to fill this bowl. We can do so very easily using the regions tool. So if I draw a region in here, let's come to our edges here. And don't worry about the bleed over here, we'll fix that in a second. Bring this down just a hair, like this. Now if I come in and I fill and select water, so now we've filled this area with that material. Now we do have some bleed here, which we can fix very easily by manipulating the terrain there, no problem. So we've just created a little pool of water here. Very, very easy to do. So that's the basics of terrain generation. There's a lot of neat things that you can do with it. It's really going to come down to a lot of experimentation and playing around with it to get the look that you're after. But it's very simple to use. So now we have the ground covered. Let's talk about the sky. So as you see here, we have a very generic sky that I'm sure you've seen in thousands of games. We can make a lot of changes to this as well. That's all controlled under the lighting section of our Explorer. If I right click here, I insert object, and I come down here and add a sky, you're not going to notice any changes, but you do see that sky has been added. What you're looking at is called a skybox. So even though this looks like just some infinite 3D space, it's actually not. It's a series of textures. Matter of fact, there's 6 of them. And you can imagine a cube surrounding our map. So we have 4 sides, a top and a bottom, that construct our skybox. And you'll see that if you select the sky here, we have 6 textures that make up the skybox. So we can stitch together other pictures and create our own skybox. And there's a lot of free ones out there that you can make use of as well. If we go to our View menu here and select our toolbox, you can see I've searched Skybox under Models, and we get some results of very different skies. So we could do an evening sky here. If we click on it, it's going to add it to our map. I'm not sure what's going on with Studio today. It's taking its time. There we go. So we've just changed the sky there. As soon as it decides to load my assets, here we are. And you'll notice some of them are marked as high quality. This particular one is actually pretty cool looking. It's a little space nebula. Now one thing to note here, the sun and moon have disappeared. And that's something that's controlled within the skybox itself. You'll see this property here, celestial bodies shown. With this unchecked, it hides the sun and the moon. If we now check this, you'll see there's our sun and our moon is here. So depending on the look that you're after, and in this particular case these really don't work well. Number one, I mean, we're supposed to be in maybe an alien world out in deep space somewhere. You don't expect to see Earth's moon and the sun, so you can just turn them off. With them turned on, however, there are some other properties here to notice. First of all, the textures. So these are what determine what the sun and moon look like. Unfortunately, as of this time, there is no real way to change these. These are internal assets. You can find them in the Roblox Studio installation area. They're internal assets. I'm sure if you really wanted to go through the trouble of creating your own replacement for it and drop the IDs in here, it would probably show up locally for you. I've never tested it because other players are not going to see those changes. It's a feature that's been requested. I don't know what the status is on that request, but as of this moment, you are limited to these textures. Something that you can change, however, is the size. So right now we have a size of 11. Let's say we were on a planet that had just a really, really large moon, or you wanted to create a really neat effect where you've just got this huge moon kind of set in the horizon somewhere. You can adjust the size, and same goes for the sun. So we can bring this way up and increase the size of the sun as well. Star count takes into effect, takes into account the number of stars that you want generated after the sun has gone down and it's a night sky. I'm sure you've seen it in other games where you have different colored twinkling stars in the sky, and you can crank this number way, way up into, if I wanted to say 2,000, right? We can set this amount to whatever we want. It's going to increase, or decrease the density of the stars that you see in the sky. So those are the basic properties of our skybox. I'm going to delete this for now so I can show off some of the other effects here that we have available to us. And these are some really neat special effects that you might have seen in a couple of games. I'm going to show you some of them right now, and I'm going to do so in a game itself. So I'm going to launch our tester here. Give it a minute to load. I apologize for the wait times here, guys. I don't quite know what's going on. I know my internet connection is a little bit spotty tonight, so that could have a lot to do with it, trying to pull assets and whatnot. So bear with me here. May have actually crashed. Yeah, not responding. I'll launch another instance. Oh, there we are. Never mind. All right, we got it. All right, so here we are. We're in game. Now you can see the sun reflecting off of my character's arm. If I come in here to lighting and I right click, insert object, I'm going to add a bloom effect. And what this does is it causes surfaces that are affected by light to get this this neat, almost a glowing halo. If I add this, you'll see exactly what I mean. So we have this bright, sort of dreamy halo. I can turn this off and you'll see the moon is affected by it as well, the horizon lighting, the sun. So anything that's hit by light is going to experience this effect, and we can change the intensity of it. As well as the size of the halo produced. And just really make things extreme if you really want to. So that is bloom. I'm going to turn this off. We're going to use a different effect here. Insert object. The next one is sunrays. Now in this view, you don't really see any effect at all. However, if we point the camera in the direction to where there is an object in between the camera and the light source, you're going to see where this effect begins. So it's now casting light rays anywhere where that light source is being interrupted. And again, you can adjust the intensity of it change the appearance and customize things. Just depends on the look that you're after. Another property within lighting here is our ambient light. So right now we have a pretty normal looking light. We can adjust the brightness levels, turn this down or crank it way up. We can also control the color. So bring this up, and let's say we're on maybe a Martian atmosphere. So now we have this red tint. You can see it on the character. Or maybe we're entering some radioactive zone or some weird other dimension where things are purplish blue, whatever. You can tweak the color of the light and adjust the intensity and whatnot as well. Create some really bizarre effects, which may be appropriate for the type of game that you're creating. Global shadows. I typically don't turn this off for this exact reason. The results can be pretty unpredictable. But if you are setting up your own light sources, you can counteract this by just sort of determining exactly what gets hit. I'm sure this would probably be very useful in more of an eerie setting. Outdoor ambient is a little bit more drastic than the light color, the ambient light color. And you can play around with that and manipulate things. Outlines, if I drop a few parts here in the world, let's place this one right here. Now, with outlines turned off, you can't really see the separation of parts here, but if I turn this on, now it's a little bit more cartoony. So it actually draws the outlines. So again, it kind of comes down to the style of your game, whether you're going for realism or cartoony. Another thing here is fog. So right now, our fog start is 0 studs from the camera to 100,000 studs from the camera. So the distance between these numbers is so great that you don't notice the effect at all. If I were to bring this number down to 500, okay, so now everywhere from the origin of the camera to 500 studs away from the camera, we have this gradient fog effect. And what that means is that the fog is thickest at 500 studs and thinnest or invisible at 0 studs. And I can bring this number down to 50 for a much more dramatic effect. So essentially anything that is more than 50 studs away is going to be covered by this fog. If I bring this number even further down to show you, and it's distance from the camera, not from the character, right? So you can see here half of these parts aren't even visible because they fall within that fog end range here. And you can adjust the color as well to create whatever effect you're looking for. You can crank this down and let's say we're in a dark spooky forest or something like that, and obviously the skybox would need to be updated to match, but there are some neat things that you can do with the atmosphere to really create a different sort of look and feel for the game. And if you've played a lot of games, you know that this can really make a big impact on the overall feel of the game itself. So the way that you set up your terrain and your sky and your lighting and your atmospheric effects really can make a drastic difference in the success of your game and how others see it and how it feels while you're playing. So play around with these. See what works for you. Every build is going to be different. Every game is going to be different. But there are a lot of properties that you can play around with to create exactly the look that you're after. Now, there's a lot more that we can cover. I'm going to go ahead and end this video, though. We're just over a half an hour. I don't want to drag this out too far. There's a lot more to cover. So I will begin with a part 2 and roll that out to you guys as quickly as I can and cover some of the additional effects that we haven't touched. But for right now, this gives you a basic idea of how to go about shaping the world that your game is going to live in, and really sort of bring the look and feel together and create the type of atmosphere that your game needs without being limited to sort of these default happy generic settings. So I hope you've learned a lot and enjoyed the video. If you haven't already, subscribe. Make sure you follow along. There's a lot more to come. I'm going to be going into scripting here very, very shortly, and we're going to be doing some really cool things. So I appreciate you hanging in with me. I know these videos are a little bit long, but I really am trying to pack a lot more information than what most of the tutorials out there give, because I don't feel they're enough for somebody who is not already experienced with game creation. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're learning from the series. If there's anything that you would like to see done differently, drop a comment, let me know. Any questions you may have, send your feedback my way. Like the videos if you enjoyed them, and if you end up creating any content that you're proud of from these videos, I would love to see what you do. So send that my way as well. Alright, well, I'm going to leave you with that. I look forward to hearing from you guys and seeing some of the great stuff that you turn out from the lessons that you've learned here. Until next time, take care and happy building.